Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Pitch Black. So, really, what this movie does is give us the origin story of Riddick, the Vin Diesel character, that eventually goes on to do Chronicles of Riddick and eventually also Riddick, which I've seen all three of these films. And so, when going back into this one, you can kind of tell like the CGI of these monsters are to be really cheap, but there are some good, decent moments where you're just like, okay, like I can see here where they did something pretty good or something pretty decent, but a lot of it is just really cheap also. But anyways, so because when you have a movie where you have to rely on the darkness of things, it's like, yeah, so you have to rely on the fact that there's going to be poor CGI here because this movie just didn't have the budget. But eventually, in later movies, they realize, hey, man, like we are going to do something not like that other film, and like it's not going to have to like really focus heavily on CGI, which I think that was just a much better thing to do. So going into this film, we have every single Riddick movie who is, or that is to have Riddick tell us that there's always this animal side to him, or like both Riddick and something else are both animals, and so like that's why like a XYZ animal will not kill Vin Diesel because they're one and the same kind of thing. And so that happens through every single one of these movies for one reason or another, but they always have to go into something of an animal side through every single one of these things. So we also have a movie where it's like, hey, like stay in the light or you're gonna die kind of films. We get these people to eventually get picked off one by either by Monster or by just one person just not really liking another, or one person is going to turn on the rest of the people, and so that person needs to die. So, like I like the story of this, but everything besides that just kind of feels just kind of weak. In all honesty, like I like the story, the fact that like you can't judge a book by its cover because you'll find out that this book is probably not something that you will like reading or whatever. Like eventually you'll find out that it's like, yeah, this person is much shadier than I thought they were. Or hey, like this person is just like, maybe I can trust Riddick more so than I can trust anyone else. Because Riddick is seemingly going to try to save people where everybody else is just after them or after to save their own hides. So so yeah, so this is kind of like a like stay in the light movie because darkness falls, and like I guess there was just a long stretch of time where like the whole like stay in the light thing kind of movie like always still works, so they keep going with it whether or not that people are gonna like get tired of these movies or not. Um, but anyways, so really with like it kind of feels bizarre to go into Pitch Black and then eventually go through all these other movies because both Chronicles of Riddick and like Riddick are basically like one and the same. It's always like a fight 'em out kind of movie, where this one is just kind of like this bizarrish like monster film, which like like it seems such a huge disconnect from like every one of these movies, but like maybe like I never watched the animated film. Maybe they connect them somehow, or maybe they whatever. But I don't know. So, but anyways, because I never watched the animated thing. Eventually, maybe I'll watch it because I think the animated movie has some kind of connection between certain movies. I don't know. I never saw it. But anyways, so because I just relied on the live action of things, so going into this, so let's tee it up for people that have probably never heard of this movie because that could be a possibility. They've maybe They've maybe never heard of Riddick before in their lives, and justifiably so. You're missing out. Like I really liked this character so much so that eventually I like got the goggles that Vin Diesel wears, just because I thought like man like I like goggles. Those things are cool. Then also like I also just liked this character. Eventually, once we get into the Chronicles of Riddick, like there's some really good like story there that I really just do enjoy. So hopefully, I'm going to pronounce these characters' names fairly easy because there's some maybe tripping up names here and there. There might be some people that might die in this film that I might not deem them to be important, so I might just kind of like skirt around of like, okay, so and so's person just dies, and like so bad or too bad, so sad for them. But I think I'm also going to pause here to do a little bit of a reset. So let me give you 6 minutes in, and he's already in reset territory. Yeah, because I've kind of been trying to like kind of get out this movie, try to like figure out the best way to like try to review it, and so like I've kind of been like tripped up about little details. So hopefully no one gets tripped up on the fact that I trip up somewhere, because eventually it'll happen. So yeah, this movie I think is like it's fun in its own way, but again, it's just a vehicle to get us to bigger and better things, honestly. So let's go out of our way to say that we've seen this movie because we have. And I think it's that coveted time yet again to go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about the time to spoil this movie. So, in the very beginning of this film, we are to have Riddick, who is to basically set up all of these characters, whether they are important, whether not important. Either way, Riddick is going to take the time to set all these characters up because he's the only person that is awake during cryogenic sleeping, because supposedly the animal side of a person is to be awake during this cryogenic stasis of a thing. And so Riddick is wide awake compared to everyone else. And so Riddick is to mention who all these people are, set us up for that. And eventually he's also to set us up to mention that William Johns is to eventually take Riddick to this slam or this like prison. And so Riddick is to mention it's like, well, yeah, that's great and all, but really there's a lot of things that can happen from point A to point B, like where they are now to eventually making it to the slam or whatever term that he said this was. But so coincidentally during that perfect time, I guess there is to be some kind of meteor shower or something that caused this ship to get off course. And so we have Captain Fry, who is to wake up to try to handle the ship. And so we also have her co-pilot, who is to be Owens, who is to also wake up as well. So Fry is to have to make an emergency landing upon this planet. And so Fry is to just start dumping all of the cargo, even to the point of almost dumping the cryogenic people cargo, because Fry can't get the nose down. No one's just like, do not freaking like release these people. Like you're gonna kill them. Like do not do this. And so Fry is trying to get this ship down and trying to do the best they can. And so eventually everyone, when they are to wake up, we're all applauding Fry's effort because, like, hey, like, we're still alive. Thank God for this. And so these people are to be stuck on this planet. Immediately, there's to be a head count to be done where eventually Johns is going to have to figure out where the heck is Riddick. And so Johns is to eventually go to find where Riddick is because he's out of his cryostasis thing. So Johns is to eventually get surprised by Riddick because Riddick is to fall and to wrap his legs around Johns and to try to suffocate him with his legs. So, while Riddick is kind of like dangling onto this one piece of the ship, uh, Johns is to go and take his baton and fling it out and to just start like batting freaking Riddick to eventually have Riddick fall over. And so Johns is to mention it's like, well, hey, like if we keep going round and round like this, eventually someone's going to get hurt, and it's definitely not going to be me. So that leaves to eventually Riddick, numerous times over, consistently getting handcuffed to something or tied to something, or eventually Riddick consistently escaping or getting free to the point of John just saying, you know what? Like, I just don't want to worry about you anymore of having to chase after you. So how about I just let you loose and you just decide that you just don't want to kill everybody. How about that? Like, how about that? So, but we'll get there. So, Riddick is to get cuffed with his hands like way far outreach behind him, to where eventually he has to like pop his freaking shoulders to eventually escape in a very like Houdini-like manner almost, to get out of this one spot that he's in and let himself loose. So when Riddick is to become loose, eventually uh, Fry and Johns are having this moment alone, and Fry is to mention that Owens was going to keep everyone safe while Fry was going to kill everyone off. And so Johns is like, well, like, I guess that's great that like I should be really valuing my life more than I am. Cuz when this ship is to crash, eventually Fry is to find Owens and find that he has a piece freaking through his body, through his heart, and that they can't pull it out or that will instantly kill this man. And so Owens is to wake up and just scream bloody murder. And so Owens is to eventually die, and so that is just lead us to this moment where I talked about Johns and Fry talking about the whole ship situation, and Riddick, who is just kind of like having his ear to just kind of hear them talk about this. Because Riddick is very tempted to try to kill Fry off, because we find out that Johns is to mention that Riddick had escaped from prison before by flying out. So Riddick is a pilot just like Fry is. So Riddick is to want to, I guess, kill Fry so that way Riddick becomes very, very valuable to all of these people. So they won't kill Riddick off at some point early on in this film. So, and plus also John has this bounty on Riddick that it's like worth twice if Riddick is still alive. So what ends up happening is that like people are now scared that Riddick is supposedly on the loose. So Johns is to give Zeke a gun, and so Johns, Jack, Sharon, who a lot of people probably know from the show, like Farscape, but if you don't, like Claudia Black, and Fry are to eventually go to try to like look for things in this planet, try to scavenge things in this planet, and I think Claudia Black stays with the ship. Like, she kind of looks out, but then eventually she goes back in the ship, and there are people that are kind of just scavenging on the ship. And, like, so they're to go out for a brief moment to see that there's multiple suns, but then they go, like, certain people go back into the ship to just start to scavenge, and then there's other people that are going out to eventually find a outpost, or a facility that is to, like, kind of see what happened with the people that are here, and they're going to find out that this place is completely deserted because everyone is to be dead. But not everyone is to figure that out all too quickly. But Riddick does. So some of the people are back onto the ship, just kind of looking for things, and there just seems to be one last random survivor that is to just say, "Hey, like, I didn't think anyone was alive. Thank God. Like, thank God I'm here." And all of a sudden, we have Zeke, who has this gun, and he fires upon this guy. He's like, "Oh crap! I thought that this was Riddick." As Zeke is to go and, like, hunch down, we see, like, Riddick in the background. He's just kind of, like, drinking some wine and whichever, because Paris was to have had this one, like, Egyptian cotton full of this, like, alcohol and a number of kind of valuable things. And Fry is mentioning that it's a giant mistake for them to be chugging down wine like this because it just dehydrates them more. And Johns is like, well, like, there's nothing else to drink here, so we're left with this. To eventually have Jack having to even forcibly also consume alcohol. So, this leads us to having Zeke go off and try to bury this body, but eventually, while burying this body, he is to see a hole appear, and so, of course, Zeke, being curious, goes into this hole to end up dead. And so, naturally, a lot of people just assume that Zeke had been killed by Riddick, and eventually it leads Riddick to just eventually get caught by these guys again, and they decide, okay, well, we're gonna cuff you, we're gonna take you in, and we're gonna, like, strap you again to the ship yet again. And so Riddick is having this moment with quite a few people, helping us understand his origin story, and helping us also, like, understand some of these characters. Because Riddick is to have a moment with with Fry, to mention, it's like, hey, like, if anything, I think you're a little bit too trusting of Johns, because he has consistently the shakes, and, like, he has, like, withdrawal syndromes of obviously a guy who is to take a lot of drugs. And it's kind of interesting how they had, like, no medication to give Owens for pain, and why Owens had to scream in pain like he did, because this guy had probably been drugged up just like Johns had been. And, like, they don't actually show this in this movie, but, like, you naturally have to assume that both Johns and Owens were, like, drug people that eventually got, like, Owens, like, kind of like, like, I'm not getting any of my drugs, so this is gonna hurt like a mother. So also, like, Riddick is to mention, like, I didn't kill Zeke, like, there's something else here that is much more of a threat than I am, and so, like, you guys need to figure out what that is. So that leads us to have Fry going and trusting what Riddick is saying, and so she goes to find out where Zeke had died at and went into this cave to go and check things out. They, oddly enough, give this girl a rope to probably just hang herself, I guess. So Fry goes in here to go into this cave, and eventually these creatures are just kind of like, kind of just quickly running from here to there. You can't really see them, but I guess this is to be just a scary moment where it's like, oh my god, like anything could happen and this girl could easily and quickly die. But like it seems like they're focusing way too much on this character, so I don't think that's actually going to happen. I think they're going to wait till somewhere in the very end and take this person out because script. So Fry is to eventually go through this cave and start seeing these monsters, and that is to lead her to desperately try to get out to the opening of one part of this cave to yell out like, hey, help me, and eventually the group is to hear Fry and try to grab her to pull her out of this, but the rope is being grabbed by these monsters, so Fry is saying like, get this thing off, and so they unhook her, and so she's like, she's fine, she's not scarred, she's not anything, and so now Fry is really starting to trust Riddick even much more so than before, and so Fry is to ask John about his drug use because here's when John, as when Fry is to basically walk in, like John's is like putting something in his like eye, like his like by his like iris or whatever, the like the little pink part here, like Fry is to like put like a drug in his eye. So Fry is to like say, oh, I guess that's why we didn't have any like morphine or whatever for Owens when he was to be in pain, because you're taking all the drug supplies and putting it into yourself. Johns is to mention that he had been hurt previously because of Riddick, and so that's what Johns needs the medication for, is that because he has a pain in his, like, I think a part of his back that isn't to just go away. But if someone else is going to die, like, John thinks that his drugs just takes precedence, I guess. So pushing on. So eventually Fry is to make it to this facility and find out that there is going to be a lot of there's going to be a lot of day here because there's like 3 to 4 different suns, and like, yeah, we're going to have a lot of sun, but eventually every single one of these suns will be snuffed out, and they're also going to be in a lot of darkness as well for a while to just try and survive in whichever, to where they just have a lot of very limited resources, so like things like light becomes like fairly difficult to come by. Anyways, so Fry is to, while they're at this facility, they're to come to finding a ship, and they're like, okay, great, now we just need to get every single power source or battery from this other ship and transition it onto this one, and I think we should be in good shape. And that's going to be the hardest part of dragging these things to this other location, and that's going to take some doing. So that leads Johns to just make a deal with Riddick. Hey man, like, I just don't want to chase after you this whole time we're here. So I'm going to cut you loose, and you're going to just have to remember this moment. And that, like, Johns doesn't want to chase after Riddick, and also Riddick is a technically valuable person to these people, and so on and so forth. So Riddick goes and takes this gun from Johns and is pointing it at him. And he's like, "I want you to remember this moment." like just kind of consistently, there's this like back and forth thing that they have with one another. Just be like, "Yeah, you're gonna like you remember when I could have killed you." Like, yeah, so are you. So Riddick gives Johns back this gun, and he goes off to play nice with people. And also, they find out that Riddick is going to be like the X factor to this thing. Eventually, when they are to go outside, Riddick can see everything that not everyone can. So, when all of these monsters are to be popping off and to escape from where they were, everyone is just asking Riddick, "What do you see? Like, how many are there?" And Riddick is just like, "Beautiful," and like all these kind of like, but they're like, "How many?" like what's going on? And Riddick is not really saying much because like Riddick would probably just tell him like, "Yeah, we're gonna die." So what they try to do at first is they decide that they're going to like bunker down into the ship and like find a part of the ship where they are to try to uh, just kind of like rest it out or to try to uh, like feel they can like try to avoid these things, but that doesn't exactly work out. Eventually, these monsters make their way into the ship, and then people are having to defend themselves in very small quarters. We have Riddick and one of Abu's boys that are all eventually going to Mecca. Um, we have Riddick telling this kid, like, "Hey, like, don't run. Like, you're gonna make it worse if you run. Like, don't like just like stay here and just don't move." But of course, this kid makes the mistake of moving like any normal stupid person would, and we just see the kid run off to eventually get eaten by something that is barely shown. Like torn apart by something, and that guy is to die. So eventually, Riddick is to just run like as quickly as possible, but that is to lead his eyes right into these flashlights. He's like, God, like, so he has to like just duck because he's just blinded. And so Johns goes and takes a shotgun to one of the aliens and kills one of them off. And so they're like, "Okay, we need to go to make it to this other ship and get the heck out of here." So they come up with a plan of one. Riddick is gonna be their guide, and Riddick is like, "Well, okay, but like if anything, I want like the light on the back of me, like not in my face. Like if I'm gonna be the guide here, then like you guys are gonna have to like listen to me." So Riddick is like setting up all these rules, and so they kind of find any stretch of like light that they can put together. It seems like there's this neon ash like rope that is attached to some like thing that might be a battery of sorts. And so everyone just like wraps themselves with neon like this neon rope that is attached to this battery, and so they just kind of have like the tail end of it, and they're just kind of using it as like a flashlight or a weapon. Uh, Paris is to also have bottles of alcohol that these people are to kind of customize. It's some kind of like torch, uh, with the end of it being like some kind of way to get like a flame off to the end of it, like a customizable torch with alcohol. And and so like they're kind of going at this in a very interesting way. At like first they have a bunch of uh like flares or like road flares that eventually they bust out every once in a while. So everybody's thinking that like, yeah, like we got this, like if anything this is gonna work. And so all it's just gonna take is one stupid person to like one bad apple to like f everything up, and eventually that happens. So these people are all chugging along, and so the light is to be working for the most point. And then all of a sudden we have one guy who is to be Paris, that is to like be frightened because these things are to be coming consistently. So Paris decides, you know what, I'm going to run off on my own and just like rip this neon rope, which is to basically destroy this battery to kill all of the neon rope things that are on everyone else. And so Paris goes on his own to have this one flask and this one lighter. And so he's like, man, I wanted to die in Paris. Like, I wanted to die in Paris, France. Paris goes and takes this flask and takes this lighter and blows light out further on. And he is just to be seen surrounded by these monsters. And it's like, dude, you're gonna die. And Riddick is gonna watch the whole thing happen as this guy is to be consumed. And I think Fry asks him, it's like, do I want to know what's happening? And Riddick is like, no. So they decide that it's like, well, like plan B. Let's come up with plan B. Because I think when people are like scrambling back to the ship, that's when Sharon, who is like Claudia Black, when they're scrambling to get back into the ship to hide into the ship, uh, Sharon just gets nibbled by all these like small monsters and she gets killed. So like I forgot about that. So I'm kind of bringing back to that Sharon ends up dying being via that way. So Plan B. So their thing is to just take these batteries and to just take whatever like torch or whatever they have left, and let's just like book it. Like let's try to run as quickly as possible for as long as possible. And so like that's their master plan. But Riddick is to say, well, here's the thing though. Uh we have a woman that's bleeding. And these things are attracted because of blood. And Fry is like, I'm not cut. And Rick is like, no. Like, Jack is a woman. And Jack is just like, yeah, like, I am having my time of the month. And, like, I didn't think, like, I thought everyone, like, thinking me as a boy, like, it would be fine. And, like, Jack is to be cosplaying as Riddick. And, like, Paris was to, like, rag on him, rag on her for like, hey, I guess she's gonna win the costume of the month award or whatever, like the costume contest that I guess I didn't know we were having. So, so Jack is to, I guess, be having her time, and so that's when we have both Riddick and John kind of separating themselves from the pack. And so John is starting to make a plan with Riddick to just be like, you know what, like I think that we should just like if it's us, like it's gonna be just us against them. Like Riddick, you go ahead and kill Jack, so that way, like, because she's gonna weigh us down. Like she's gonna die anyways, so let's make this quick. And Riddick is like, yeah, let's make this quick. And so Riddick is to go and fight out Johns, and Johns is to consistently bust out these flares. And Riddick is to tell Johns is like, well, yeah, there's only one rule, like stay in the light. So, stay in the light. Anyways, so this is to, because there's this consistent time where Johns is thinking that he's gonna have the upper hand on Riddick, but eventually Riddick is to have this like small little shiv that was to be just a grooming utensil, but became just much more than that. So, and so we have Riddick and Johns just kind of like fighting it out, but this is to, of course, eventually lead because other Riddick movies to have Johns, of course, die because eventually he gets taken by one of these monsters and killed like anything else. Because Riddick goes and slices the back of Johns, and that immediately just says lunchtime for all these aliens, and so they go and grab Johns and kill him. Uh, and so Riddick doesn't really have to. So, and plus there's always that, like, remember this moment kind of thing where they always have to play into that. Anyways, so Johns is sadly now dead, and so that just limits how many people are actually left. So Riddick is just basically tossing these batteries onto his back and just telling everybody, move! So everyone is running like crazy to make their way to the ship. And Abu, who is played by Keith David, is consistently losing his sons. Consistently. Just like we'll have one where like a monster is just grabbing this guy and like and basically just running with him up this incline of a like cliff. And Abu was like, no, Fuji B, or whatever the guy's name is, Fuji B. What I don't remember what the actual guy's name is, and I probably am ill pronouncing it, so I'm not gonna IMDb that one. But like all these guys that Abu is to be with, freaking all get killed. So that leads us to have this one speed of time where Riddick is to stop, because at some point they were going round and round in this circle, but eventually they head to where they're supposed to. And that's when John and Riddick were having this fight out, because Riddick was trying to figure out how exactly they can get down to where they're supposed to and live. So now we have this rush of them getting to this spot where they have to try to figure out how to make it through this like big giant like boned animal that is just fossilized or whatever. So they're kind of like trying to like figure out how to like squeeze in here, and Riddick makes it through, but eventually Jack is to be stuck here because this alien is smacking into this bone. Fry is trying to use this flashlight to try and stop this alien or monster. Riddick is continuing on, just like, dude, I'm freaking out. Like, I made it. But then Riddick decides, you know what, I'm going to go back. Like, I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to go back. So Riddick tries to fight this thing, and of course he ends up winning. Riddick takes all of all of these people and says, like, okay, hide in here, and I'm going to just go and take all these batteries and make it to the ship and see you later. I'm like, no. All of a sudden, Fry, Jack, Abu are to realize, is he gonna come back for us? They don't even really much have like a real torch left to them, but coincidentally it seems that there is some insect that is to be a glow in the dark like insect, so they take every single one of these insects, put them into this alcoholic bottle, and now like there's technically a light of sorts that they luckily have. So uh so Fry is to just be like, okay, well, I'm gonna get out of here and I'm gonna have Riddick come back with more lights. So Fry leaves, makes it back to Riddick, and so Riddick is just like, hey Fry, how's it going? Like, you're gonna come with me, right? Like, we're gonna leave. Like, we're gonna leave them just stranded there, and we're just gonna leave right now. And Fry is like, no. Like, I told them we'd come back with more light, and so that's what we're gonna do. And Riddick is just like, there is no more light. Like, there is like we barely just got here, and so now we're here. Let's leave. Like, leave like you were going to do in the very start of this movie, to just leave them to die. And so now Riddick has to really ask Fry, because Fry does not want to leave these people. And so Riddick is like, well, like, would you die for them? And Fry is like, well, I would try for them. And Riddick's like, that's not what I asked. Would you die for them? And Fry says yes. So Riddick is like, okay, interesting. So Fry and Riddick go back to get both Jack and Abu. So they're making their way, they're hauling their butts to make it to the ship. And so we have Abu and Jack that make it there, and also Fry. But eventually Riddick is to eventually get stalled or stopped or whatever with these monsters. So Riddick is to try to like maneuver in some way to mimic the movements of this animal, so that way like he thinks that he can kind of like, if he moves like they do, that they'll get confused and not really see him. And Riddick is like eventually getting like, I think he gets like cut in the leg and kind of like chucked into a number of spots. So Fry is to say like, well, hey, Riddick went after like these people, like I'm gonna go after Riddick, and that'll be a mistake. So Fry goes after Riddick, and Fry was to mention to Riddick that she will go back, like she'll die for Abu and Jack, but she won't die for Riddick. So Fry goes back and tries to like take like Riddick onto her like shoulder, just kind of flings his arm onto her shoulder, and she's just kind of like trying to like quickly get Riddick onto the ship. But that is to just lead to have Fry get grabbed by these aliens and killed. And Riddick is like, not for me. Like, you weren't supposed to die for me. So Riddick makes his way back to the ship and closes the door. They get everything set up to get the heck out of here. All of a sudden, all the aliens are making their way to this ship because there's people in it. And Riddick is like, we can't go. We can't leave. And they're like, well, why? And Riddick is like, yeah, like, we can't leave without saying goodnight. And that's when he freaking kills like all the aliens that he can possibly kill. And then they lift off and then they make it on to outer space. And so we had this consistent time where we ask, like, what is to happen to Riddick in this situation? To basically just say that Riddick had probably died through some part of this whole ordeal. And when Jack is to ask, hey, like, what happens if they ask about Riddick? Just say that Riddick is dead. Here's also the thing that I kind of skipped about. Riddick is to mention how exactly he gets these silver eyes that we see through most of this movie, where we are to see that Riddick can see at night compared to everyone else. So, what happens is that Riddick had killed a ton of people and had been sent to a prison or a slam that is to have a doctor tell Riddick that he is to never see the light of day. I guess because this doctor had been really richly be paid off to change Riddick's eyes to have this problem being able to see during the day. So that's why Riddick is to consistently have these sunglasses on throughout all of this movie until there's like shadowy moments where eventually you see him and whatever. But like I hoped that I covered a bulk of this movie. Eventually, there's going to be some scenes here and there that I'm probably going to regret that I didn't say. But I also want to get out of my way to get the heck this. Bleh. I also wanted to just like get this done. I liked this movie, but it's just a vehicle to get me to other things that I enjoyed more. And really, that's what I have to say about this movie. Like it's a good like setup, but really it just like it's pales in comparison to the other Riddick things. So hopefully you're Riddick fans and you want me to go and watch the other things. If this is going to be another zeroed viewed movie, maybe I'll just go and watch like Riddick or the Chronicles of Riddick and like see how those videos go. Because more than likely those movies might be more popular or whichever. There's some times where like some origin things just don't go that well, but other things do. So with that said, I am going to call it a do and get the heck out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.